I wanted us to make a difference. Which country imports the most of finished goods from South Africa? Is it the European Union as a bloc, or is it the United States, or is it China?
No, European Union, absolutely no question about it.
Hoping that with the current trade reorganization, the European Union is going to get more of what they are getting now, in addition to what they're already getting?
Yeah, though some of those processes were in motion without any trade war. Those things were already happening organically. Anyway, it's just that people, once the trade war started happening, just lumped everything into one basket. Actually, South Africa was continuously developing other markets other than the US. So if you were to rate those countries in terms of finished goods, the EU would be number one, USA would be number two, China would be number three at best, and then the other African countries. So China would be the one that has been taking things like that. But the finished goods would be the Europeans and the Americans, USA. Now, let me just add this point that we have been trading with the USA since 1871, right? AGOA was a unilateral proposal by the United States which we accepted, but meaning that they started, when we say something is unilateral, we didn't start it, they started it. It was to our favor. It was an affirmative action program for African countries to trade with the US on more favorable terms. It was an affirmative action program. But we had been trading with the US since 1871, right?
The trade relationship between the US and South Africa, when the terms of South Africa?
No, it didn't change it substantially because the percentage of trade that was under AGOA was still small compared to our traditional trade with the US. So what was saying is that what was said when this trade war started was that, you know what, can we normalize the way it was before AGOA, actually, because now when we trade with the US on the basis of preconditions, because when you get this type of deal, then it gives the US opportunities to discuss your internal policies and other things. But before then, we're just trade partners. If you want wine, we've got a lot of good wine here. We supply you with the wine, etc., etc., etc. If you want cars, we give you cars. So to your point, it's not saying, yeah, we don't want the United States of. If I were to be actually exactly straight with you, the answer is that, can we then trade on merit with the United States? We've traded since 1871 in fact, up until today, because AGOA is a very small percentage of the business we do with the United States. Our trade with the United States has been exchanging of value for value based on merit. And right now, the Americans themselves have got to come to that. We will trade you, we'll buy American goods on merit, you buy our goods on merit, and let's forget about any other discussion.
So you are proposing a renegotiation of the bilateral investment treaty between the United States or bilateral trade agreements between the United States and South Africa.
I'm saying exactly that, except this, that AGOA was not 100% of our trade. So if you want to scrap it, can we go back to how we used to do business? And it was a lot of business that had nothing to do with any other discussion.
So you just want trade based on trade now, no additions, only trade.
That is what I am saying. And that is what we should be saying across the board. Because there are other things now, the cultural things that kick in there, and then that is why you then end up with a situation.
What do you mean by cultural things?
For example, when you talk Chinese, they will say, we want this, but Chinese characteristics. We want to run democracy with characteristics, that sort of thing. Then you listen to Percent, the finance or the Minister of Finance of the USA, going to places like the IMF and World Bank, that they should insist that every country on earth must implement private sector-led economic development. That is something that these guys believe. That is what Percent and company believe. That is what Trump and company believe, that if you are running your country, it must be a private sector-led economy, right? That's what they believe. And that to me is a cultural belief. It's what you prefer. It's your style of doing things. And I don't know how you go about doing that in the first place. Why must you not just buy the car from the Chinese and enjoy that? Why must you then dictate their policies internally? Why must you insist that they must stop socialism? You go to the Nordic countries. They are running social democracies there. You say you sector-led economic growth. Those people, out of their own culture, because when you trace the Nordic economic model, it came out of certain traditions and certain beliefs that they've had. Now, percent out there what is J.D. Vance out in the fields of Kentucky comes out, no, this thing must be a Christian civilization. It must be a Christian civilization, and everybody must adhere to this Western Christian civilization and the values of it, of private property. There must be private property. As Africans, for instance, we don't even believe in those title deeds or private property. Somebody came up with it. We had no problem with our land. We knew which land belongs to who here without any of that. So with cultural issues.
So what are you asking for instead this African trade or business environment be governed?
The trade, for instance, there are many countries, New Zealand. New Zealand has never wanted to discuss anything with us other than you are selling me, I'm buying this and I'm paying you for it. And it ends there.
And they do buy.
They do buy. It's just that, I didn't come here with statistics of this. So many
That's all right.
that are doing business and not asking us to change our culture. And now, I'm going to call you to a meeting. You've come to sell him some cases of wine. You've got wines that you want to give to him, South African wines, and he wants to discuss other things. And what is that for?
So, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will be meeting with President Trump in the White House next week. What is in his bag?
The first thing that is going to happen there is exactly what I've said. That, guys, let's let the economists work on the numbers and fair trade deal on merit. We don't want anything else. We don't want things that we don't qualify for. But if you have,
don't you think the Trump administration is one that would give you that kind of business environment where the numbers are talking for them? What he's just been doing in the Middle East now, I don't think he's been focusing so much on democracy, human rights, and all the other components that come with American businesses.
Yes, isn't it now? What the question is, what do I think should be or is in the basket of Ramaphosa, right? Because there are families. So businesses are not just loose businesses. When you talk about trade, you're talking about entrepreneurs and families that have built business relationships in the US with people they know. There are linkages. So you got to allow that to take its own course because there's this confusion that there are countries that are trading. There's no such a thing as countries that are trading. These are companies that make deals with private companies and individuals who want to buy these products. So the first thing would be to say, can you allow this trade that has gone on since 1871 to proceed? So that would be the first thing.
But governments are there to facilitate trade between individual companies of the different countries. So definitely that conversation is going to come up. And I also believe that Elon Musk is going to be part of Trump's delegation. And we know not bad blood. We know the relationship between Elon Musk and South Africa right now. How do you think that is going to play out in the conversations?
The Elon Musk wants concessions from South Africa for his company in the telecom sector. He was invited to come and submit documents because if you are going to run a telecoms company, there are processes that you go through and submit certain documents, and didn't pitch up with the documents. Everybody else pitched up and submitted. So he's going to want to apply in a political meeting, to go to a political meeting and apply for a license to come and run a telecoms company here. And remember that we've got very powerful telecoms companies here. So the envoy that was chosen by Ramaphosa to go and represent us in the US, which is Mcebisi Jonas, is actually the chairman of MTN. And we have indigenous, highly powerful international, multinational corporations in the telecom sector in their own rights. And they don't want Elon Musk any favors in South Africa. And they are business people themselves. So if he did not participate in the applications process and thinking that he can go to a political meeting and apply in the political meeting, he might be in for a high jump.
But his problem is certain requirements about shareholding that he thinks should not be given out. I understand that it is South African law and South African law is supposed to be respected within South Africa, but does that law not frustrate economics? Does it not give advantage to certain cronies of the regime who continue perpetrating the law so they can become richer while the population suffers?
So anybody who makes that allegation must then say MTN are cronies of the ANC and they've been given special advantages, and you need to produce evidence of that. You need to say the same about Vodacom. And in this satellite telephony, which Musk is interested in, there are many companies whose names you don't even know. By the way, where I am, as I told you, I'm off grid. We're using satellite here, right? It's not Elon Musk satellite, right? So we have companies that are already operating satellite telephony, and it has been so for a long time. And there are other technologies, telephonic technologies. These are white Afrikaner-owned companies that have got nothing to do. The company I buy my telecom services from is a white company, white Afrikaner company with nothing to do with the ANC. And they comply with the law in South Africa. So anybody who said these laws are favoring this one or favoring that one must produce them.
Yes, and you have argued somewhere that the poverty rate is so we want the 90% poor population to have to make up or to be made whole, so that there can be some equality in South Africa. What are you exactly by that?
So they've been done recently, right? Whereby for any level of education, the wealth of the black is 5% of the white person, right? So my children attended what you might schools, right? So if we were to take my children and measure their wealth compared to their classmates, they would have the wealth of their classmates, the people they went to university with, or they went to school with and went through to, who are white. So in calculation, I would say that the net worth of a 27-year-old is 100,000. It must be on average 100,000. I'm not saying the composition must be the same. I'm not saying they must own exactly the same. The net worth, the value must be the same. So it's as straightforward as that. So as you sit there, you know that you are not as rich as Elon Musk as you sit there. So when to be equal to Elon Musk, you cannot be confused about what am I saying. I'm saying you must have the same balance sheet as him. So, and you know that you don't have it. So there can be no confusion there. So we also know that when the international benchmarks are done, the black schools in the black townships and in the rural areas where black don't feature on the international benchmarks. So the white schools actually compete favorably with the top European countries. The black schools are not able to compete with other African countries. The black schools here in South Africa are not on par with other African countries. They are below. So the inequality inside of South Africa, and education is a function of the state to equip your citizens to create a productive citizenry. That education system, every child must get the same education. And I've quoted examples from Finland. You get the same schooling regardless of where you are. And it's possible human beings are able to achieve that.
But how do we achieve this? It's not based on government policy.
I am saying exactly that. I am saying that bear in mind that we must not compensate for the fact that the government has fallen off its horse, the current government, right? If the government was on its horse and doing its proper job like the government of Finland, we would be getting these things that we need, right? These things are possible. Other countries are achieving them. They are part of the mandate of government. They should be done by and the government is not doing these things. And these things are important. If people are going to enjoy the resources are here, everything is here to get these things done. These things are just not getting done.
You have just made the argument that cultural issues from other countries should not be preconditioned on relationships between different countries, meaning we should not copy examples, because in the Nordic countries like Finland, democracy developed organically. So what could we say is responsible for the poor schools in South Africa, whereas our example should not necessarily come from Finland, as you say, because our development should be organic?
So the problem you have here is that our government is the horse, right? So now we have to give excuses, kinds of excuses. Let's give you an illustration. In it is to be a school principal of a school that does not exist. So you have to go to a village, talk to chief, and start the school from scratch. So when my father went to school for the first time to do his primary education, he went to the school that was built from scratch by his grandfather, by his father, sorry, which is my grandfather. So when I sat down and calculated what had happened there from our family's perspective, this was not a private school, a church school, it was a government school under apartheid. My father went to that school. I am the youngest family member that I could trace who went. So I counted about 10 descendants of my grandfather who went to that school. My father and the youngest being me. Out of that, my father went to that school, got a BA from Rhodes and an MBA from Wits. His younger brother became an architect from UCT. Me and my brother graduates from Wits University, coming out of that environment. So what has happened here is that the concept of Black leadership and Black excellence, especially in the past 15 years, has been obliterated because we've produced people who've gone from those village schools, gone to graduate at Cambridge, Oxford, elsewhere. So we were organized in a certain way that we could actually produce high-performing students using certain approaches and certain methods to create that without oppressing anybody. So my view is that because of the leadership, especially in the past 15 years, those things that we could even do for ourselves in the villages and in the Black townships, it's just the fiber, the social fiber, it's just been whittled.
You've made a point here that makes me think. Now we're hearing all the stories about whites, the current over the Black BBE laws, but I don't think we heard about these last 10 years. Is it the failed government policies that is giving a room blame somebody or to blame the Afrikaners, or is it necessarily because the Afrikaners are performing poorly?
When you're a leader of people and they become divided, there's nobody else to blame other than the leader. If Afrikaners today are complaining that they are being oppressed by the Black government or by the Black population, the statistics that are available in South Africa show the opposite, right? But that is not to say there are no places where the government has really made things very bad for everybody, except that the Afrikaners have got more access to the media to communicate internationally and to communicate on social media even better than the Blacks about the situation. But the situation that we are facing in South Africa, I don't even believe it's about the policies, right? It's about just stopping to do the good that was being done. Because that is that we're going to tell lies. And the lies are that this government has never been successful. Up until 2008, there was actual success here. And then let me also talk about this BEE, because it appears to be quite a big controversy. BEE, some of the people that contributed to the BEE here in South Africa is there Sullivan from the United States, who said if American companies invest in South Africa, they must practice affirmative action. And he actually enunciated in detail, and it was implemented. So I will tell you this. When I became a trainee in IT in 1988, my immediate boss was a Black guy of 31 years old in 1988. His boss was 41 years old, Black guy in IT. So you can imagine that these guys, some of the units were being run by IT guys that were brought up by affirmative action programs that had already started in the 70s, mainly as a result of the influence of the Americans. It was the Americans who kickstarted the idea of affirmative action and BEE in South Africa. Anglo-American started, Oppenheimer, Anglo-American and all that, they started their affirmative action program in 1982. I was one of the beneficiaries of that, okay, direct beneficiaries of that. Started by white men. ESCOM started theirs in 1985. So the engineers that you got when you got independence were actually produced by the Black affirmative action programs that were happening starting back in the 70s. So the ANC did not start BEE in South Africa. It was started prior. It was already in motion prior. They continued with it and so on. But the friction, when you create situations where security is not attended to, the police are corrupt, they are not doing their jobs. Eventually people turn on xenophobia and all sorts of things start to kick in. Ethnic, cliques and all sorts of things kick in. So I don't even want to say the problems here is policy. The problem here is non-performance. The problem is non-performance.
So what I'm hearing from you is those who have the BEE laws may be complaining because the current government is not performing as it's supposed to perform. The Afrikaners or the whites, they fear that they are being targeted because of the failures of the current regime. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is true. And they are also being opportunistic because even your worst enemy, you've got to acknowledge his achievements, right? So we've got to be able to identify those things that were done correctly and then say, now the mistakes are here, and this is how they get fixed. You can't just sweep everything now and say the whole thing is a disaster. It is not.
I don't know if you have watched any of my previous videos, but I've interviewed representatives of the AfriForum and Solidarity, and they share your view. They say the main problem is the ANC. The current leadership is failing. It's corrupt also. They have also made these claims, and they kind of put the responsibility on the current government and say that the government is simply hiding behind their failure to push policies that are targeting them at this
where I differ with them, and I differ with the current government, because now they're introducing reforms, right, and things like that. The problem is that with the old policies before 2008, we were very successful. We produced more Afrikaner billionaires with those policies. White Afrikaner billionaires. Whites became extraordinarily rich under the ANC government. They set new records.
So if something is not broken, why fix it?
This is the problem. Now, falling off the horse. The only thing you got to do, catch the horse, slow it down, get back on the horse. Don't now tell us that, no, we are going to change the spikes of the horse, we are going to change this and the other. All you need to do, get back on the horse, right? So
now I'm thinking.
Yes, I've written this on Twitter. I think you saw that, right? Because, I mean, I didn't want to put it as bluntly as I'm putting it to you now, right? So, the point is that Com was winning world awards with affirmative action, with PISCOM, with black management, with a black president, with a minister, right? And there was electricity and so on and so forth. Then a certain group of people came in. And some of these white organizations were part of that plan to kick Mbeki out, right? And all of that. And Mbeki made his own political mistake, blunder, strategic mistakes of how to protect that legacy that had been achieved. He didn't know how to protect it. And that is why we have this mess now, right? But we need to be honest about it. We need to be very honest about it.
Yeah, so you are saying that it's not a question of policy or ideology that changed. You are insisting that it's a question of people. People are responsible for the failures in South Africa. And if the people who are in power simply get back to what was happening in 2008, we will not hear complaints from any segment of the population because the economy will only get better. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I mean, there are always complaints, by the way, but complaining on a full stomach is different from complaining with an empty stomach versus a full stomach. Things are going well. The electricity is working, everything. They will not, because there's always room for improvement. So, but in short, yes, you are correct. The problems, if there are complaints and fights that are happening, including international fights that are happening, they are related to non-performance, not policy, non-performance. So as an example, people talk about investment. Mbeki set a record of attracting investment, right? And when you look at the statistics from the Reserve Bank, when government investment reaches a certain level, the private sector invests twice what the state invests. Mbeki was struggling to keep up with the private sector in terms of investment. The private sector was investing twice, and Mbeki was investing very aggressively. And that was what was creating the jobs. That was what was creating prosperity everywhere. And you can do that. You can get the investment program back on track. And I listened to a budget speech. I listened to the State of the Nation address by the government. They're going in the wrong direction. And it's not, well, you can say it's policy, but if you know what was making the success before, and the statistics are there from the Reserve Bank, they are showing clearly how it goes, why don't you do that?
So In a reflection this week, I actually said that Africa's best exports are its people, and its people are being exported in very, very bad conditions. Because of bad policies, we force people to move out, and then we complain when people treat us badly. It's necessary for us to change our ways of life and ensure that if we talk to each other and solve our problems. I don't understand why people are not talking about these problems in South Africa. There is a parliament, yes, but people need to talk beyond political settings to analyze, evaluate what is happening. Like the point you're making to me, if you listen to some people online, it's like, no, it's not the ANC's problem. It's not a governance problem. It is simply bad faith, misinformation, disinformation out there. That is not what I'm hearing from you.
What is important is what we're discussing in this show, right? Because it can be measured, identified accurately, and is technical in nature. When I say it's technical, I'm not saying it's actually complex. You know, it's like when they teach you how to drive a car, you cannot change the gear before you press the clutch. You know, there are certain things that you do. When you do those things correctly, the results produce themselves. Okay? So the people who are talking all over, bear in mind that now you have to communicate this message to a critical mass, not just to the intelligentsia, so that the voting patterns actually change. There are people, the bulk majority, when you talk about 90%, the 90% cannot have this conversation.
That is why we need to multiply such communication avenues for people to actually get the information. Because if you have to rely only on TV and radio, it's not going to get down there.
Yeah, so exactly. So no, I've started that process. Some of it I run it in vernacular now. Types of conversations, I'm running them in vernacular. And so on and so forth. Because a person who is talking nonsense, wearing a nice suit and occupying a high position, but actually saying something that can never work, it's not going to be there. I mean, I said it in 2018 when Ramaphosa made his statement about the economy and how he's going to create jobs. And I said on national television in South Africa that this man is now testing the upper limits of stupidity. And that unemployment is going to go up by 400,000 people per year. And that is exactly what happened. And is continuing today. Exactly what it started in 2018. Unemployment this year is going to go up by about 400,000. Go up, not down, go up. But we know what must be done to actually achieve the opposite.
Why do you think the right thing is not, why do you think they are not going back to the horse?
You know, the thing about it is that it's difficult because sometimes we have to admit that Thabo Mbeki is an economist. So at least there are some basics that he knows, that how you put these blocks together and how they work together. These chaps have not given themselves, and I'm talking about Cyril Ramaphosa, for instance, even including his finance minister, given themselves the time of day to really say, how does this thing actually work, and to know what will not work. You cannot apologize every year for a declining GDP growth rate. You know, so this is where now we reach a stage where we start to say, guys, we've said everything to these guys that is right, that must be done. They are not doing it. So the only thing left now is to encourage other people to campaign and move them out. Because every right thing that we say, if I say just this little thing, from 2018 saying the same thing, and I say you are going to increase unemployment by this number, and they achieve that number. It's a negative number, but they achieve it. And they are going to achieve it until 2029, until they are voted out.
That's a long time. So now what do you think is supposed to be done to remedy this situation? What are the measures that Cyril Ramaphosa and his government should put in place to change?
Yes, so there are measures that,
or should South Africans put in place?
So obviously the most important measure is for the citizens to understand that they've got to vote up these people who are having a low economic growth, that they need to be removed from power. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the investment rate, and it's called the gross fixed capital formation, which was already in any case written down in the National Development Plan of 2012, it should be 30%. So the total figure of investment must be 2.1 trillion right now, but it must be 30% of GDP, right? 3, the interest rate needs to come down so that it frees money in the economy. 4, taxes must not be increased. I'm not yet saying they must be decreased, but they must not be increased so that the buying power of the population is not reduced. 5, the police need to be restored to their former proficiency. 6, the schools need to be restored back to competitiveness. Our schools, black schools, are not competitive. They were much more competitive under apartheid, unfortunately, than they are now. We cannot build this nation without. Also, double the number of universities in this country and make education an export to the African continent. Africans are already coming here. Imagine if you have lots of Africans who study here, your ability to create intra-African trade with those people who study here. So when I go to Cameroon and I discover there are guys who graduated from South Africa, they are quick to understand me, etc., 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 etc. Our students, and I might dwell on this, need to have proper exchange programs, no matter what the content is. There are people who comment about Tanzania who've never been to Tanzania or Ethiopia or any of these places. They don't know the potential of Africa at face value. They've never been there. So sometimes some of them despise Africa, but they've never been there. So I am saying that really and truly, those practices that got us to 5% GDP growth rate, and these things I'm mentioning were already entailed there. And the last thing I will say about education is that, by the way, this government has actually destroyed vocational education, artisans, the training of artisans and technicians. That needs to be restored. You cannot build a country without artisans and technicians. So to me, those are the issues that can be done without any big political ideology. To be a good electrician, you can be produced by a communist country like China. You can be produced by Switzerland or any other country. That you don't need big ideologies here. Let me stop there.
Yeah, I thank you very much for these points because I wanted us to look at them. The first one I wanted us to talk about is what I just mentioned in the last place. I saw this tweet where they said, renowned economist Dowie Root said many of South Africa's public universities should be converted into colleges that produce the skills the economy needs. And I think this falls directly in line with your last point about vocational training. There is no way we can advance in Africa if we do not invest in manufacturing. And we should manufacture what is in our environment. That way we create an economy that is going to build itself and recapitalize and build itself moving forward. What do you think about that?
I didn't read the details of Daviro's argument, but I rejected it out of hand. I think he is actually getting carried away. You see, for instance, my training was in software, right? So depending which country you go to, software engineering, BIS, you design and you write and deploy software. It's a practical course. You build something that works, it must work, right? So, but the surrounding knowledge, you studied programming, you study the history of computing. Where did this idea come from? How did it get here? So that also helps you as an intellectual not to repeat mistakes, because sometimes you think you're inventing something, but in actual fact, that road was traveled before. So you need those. And I've worked with young people. I've run a computer laboratory before and realized I actually need those who have got strong conceptual skills, because when you have to originate software, for instance, you have to have very strong conceptual skills. So I don't agree with that. And I
think that is his argument. I don't think his argument is close all. His argument is many of them should be converted into vocational schools, which I think I totally agree with the argument you're making about software. To me, we should better get more people into science, technology, engineering, and math than into history, law, political sociology, women and gender studies.
Well. You can integrate.
Yeah, we can integrate them into the areas where they are necessary. For instance, a history student who wants to study, if you are interested in the history of law, you should study that history as part of
Your
law. Yes. So we don't have any faculties for things that
I
are
want
really
to make
not
a comment. I want to make a comment about this because David Roth needs to go back. You see, by say around 2011, artisans in South Africa had actually dropped to be lower than it was in 1975, right? Not even because the technical colleges had been closed. The comrades came in here, the ANC and all that, started to re-engineer this thing to the that now actually it became unfruitful and unproductive. We just now destroyed the ability. So even before saying I must close anything, up to the Wits School of Education, where the engineering section is, the machines that were there to train teachers who are going to be vocational education teachers who are going to train artisans, those machines were covered in cloths, they were stored. People are busy studying every other academic subject. The vocational section was inoperative. So the capacity that is there, before you close anything, the capacity that is already in the country is not being used as we speak today to do what it's supposed to do. So
is it better to have the capacity and not being used so that if the system changes, they're able to be used? Or is it better not to have the capacity at all and then struggle to change the system? Then at some point you're suffering from lack of human resources and you start going looking for resources elsewhere.
At the moment, the capacity that we had for producing artisans, the buildings, the machine, but machines, some of the machines cannot last even 5 years because the technology changes so much. But the workshops are there. They are there. You don't need to build them. They are there. They are not being used.
So what is the problem? Why are they not being used? Is it because the people are not there? Or is it because the equipment is not there or the resources are not there?
It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy. So when you don't have the philosophy that says for every engineer, I must develop 3,000 artisans, right? In different disciplines, because these devices we're talking about, by the way, whether it's your laptop or your cell phone, my part in it is very small. The software is very important, but it's actually very small. The software doesn't sit in the air. There must be people who know how to build the physical devices. So it's a mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. So when you see a device, there are so many disciplines that make a device possible. So you need to know that when you say you are going to have a mechanical engineer, there are so many other supporting disciplines of artisans and technicians that must be there in the country to support just one engineer. And the comrades...
I think you're making the same argument. You are making the same argument with David Roth, I think, because he says somewhere, let me just read it. He says somewhere that, however, there is a scarcity of drone technicians and pilots, genetics, and people with artisan skills. There is a large shortage of this type of skills. So I think you are actually saying what he's saying, but you
I'm talking about something. I'm not talking about what you observe. You see, the question is beyond what we can see. It's the philosophy, right? So when a person, so when a college, the Wits School of Education, the vocational section is not working, the president sleeps well at night. It means his belief system does not see that as a crisis. His philosophy does not permit him to see it as a crisis. It's a paradigm, right? So if you don't believe that, if you think that guys who can do civil engineering, they are still all right if they do actuarial science. It's a philosophy, because the School of Engineering, University of Pretoria, is losing students to actuarial science. These guys go and become financial engineers. They can't build a bridge. They are financial engineers, right? What kind of nonsense is that? Because as a president, you need to make the rules known. Guys, really, scholarships are available for engineering. You are going to go to engineering. You are going to be a proper master artisan. You are going to become a proper master technician. You are not going to give you scholarship for actuarial science, right? You need to say it every day on national television. There is nobody who is going to say there's underperformance in any technical college. There's not going to be any underperformance. You need to say it every day as the president and demand it from the principals and demand it from everybody. It's a belief. So when these guys see you wearing a suit and a tie, then you are the man, not in overalls.
I know that, and that is what is happening in Africa, all across Africa, because we train mostly people in the humanities and we don't care about the skills. You've made very good arguments. And are you a politician?
No, I'm not a politician. It's like when you are watching the soccer game and you are listening to the commentator, and you then don't know how to distinguish between the chairman of the club and the commentator who's commentating on the day of the match. You think that this is a club owner. It's just a commentator. He's not even a player.
Are you planning to run for office?
I don't have immediate plans of running for office. I'll make a decision in the 2034 elections. If the people who are supposed to run this country are not running it, then I will come in.
It's not a problem. Is the problem here not because of the good ideas are staying away from politics?
My job is to inspire, to mentor, to coach young politicians, especially who must take over power from the failing politicians. But if these youngsters don't do it, then I will have to do it myself.
Correct. Are you doing that in an organized setting, talking to the young politicians in an organized setting?
You must remember, when I have organized settings of a different type, because I cannot be seen to be targeting this political party or that one, I must have open sessions where people who come from different persuasions and different professions can participate. So we have quarterly seminars that we run. As I told you, I run indigenous, in the native languages, different programs, and my programs have a lot of teaching in them about African economic development, for instance, and about governance and politics and that sort of thing. So I give input to political parties. But my aim is to create an open source political platform. In other words, whether you are in the DA, you are in ANC, you are in the EFF, I want you to have ideas and to use them for the advancement of South Africa.
Yeah, but when you train them and give them all that intelligence, that knowledge to use, and the political party overtakes them, sponsors them, becomes their sponsors and their financial backers. You know the African expression that says the piper dictates the tune.
You know, the thing about it is that I grew up as a political activist, right? But not a politician. And I was an anti-apartheid activist, right? So the people who contributed to us growing up, they contributed ideas, not money. So though...
But that is not a political situation today.
Sorry?
That is not a political situation today. Today, they are contributing money to make people campaign, to make people buy consciences, to make people occupy seats, appear in large, big cars, to look important and exert some authority.
I think great politicians, great political thinkers and political actors have based their success on influencing the minds, whether it is Lenin or Mao Zedong. There is a job of shaping the minds of generation. And among them, there will be two leaders who will take the matter forward. For instance, in this country, we've not had many leaders. You can count them. Steve Biko, Robert Sobukwe, Tambo, for a long time. People don't realize that from 1960 to about the early 90s, it was Oliver Tambo carrying the ANC single-handedly. You know, so all that you need to do is to have one or two young people who capture their vision and then who have enough courage to remove whoever needs to be removed and take office and move on with it. I never felt, my life has been very odd to me. When I look at my life has been very odd to me because when I went to university, I went to study software. Growing up, I wanted to be in electronics. That's what was fascinating me. I grew up thinking that I'm a nerd. I am not known even for one software that I've ever produced. The things that I'm known for are things like this show. So I did a second major by accident. I majored in economics as a second dual. I did a major in software and economics. But it appears that the thing that's a second major ended up becoming the first major. So in practice, in real life. So life has been like that. So, but I don't shy away from it, as you can see. I don't shy away from those social issues, but my approach, I want to believe, reflect my training, that I believe these things are systems and there are certain inputs and processes and outputs that need to be obeyed. And then you achieve the results. Because you don't adopt that way your system's thinking, then something that is working, you don't realize that this is the reason why it is working, and then you make up stories as you walk along. You'll be on your way to the office, a brainwave comes in, you don't know what damage that thing you thought is going to do, because you're not a systems thinker. And I think the Chinese in their politics are very systems orientated. And there was a time when you wouldn't be occupying a senior position, you're not an engineer in China. Right? And it's not about the engineering itself, it's about the approach to thinking. It's about the approach to thinking.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It was nice talking to you, Mr. Sandile Swana. Do you have any last words for our viewers?
My last words pertain to both South Africa and Africa, which is really my focus area, and the people of the third world, but right now I'm talking to Africans, is that you need to be a good student of history, because in the process of creating progress, you often have difficulties. And I've been fortunate in that I never ran into exile. This is my 6th decade living continuously in South Africa. And I've seen the worst and I've enjoyed some of the best. And I am quite confident that over the next 10 years, this mediocrity will be arrested. In some of the countries, including some of the West African countries and countries like Ethiopia, Botswana, we are starting to see young men taking power and taking things forward. Some are scared, but I think we need young men and women who've got absolute total courage, insist that it is now time for progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've raised a few issues there that I would like us to talk about in other sessions, this podcast. So we're going to talk about that sometime in the future. Thank you so much for coming. And it's been my pleasure, Ngali. You watch, you share, you like, and you comment to keep us going. We need that energy to keep on going and shape the future of Africa. Africa without you is no Africa. Thank you so much.